Ladies and gentlemen, please make welcome the man that they call the rock brain of the universe, Mr. Glenn A. Baker.
I haven't said a word and somebody's thrust an award into my hands already. Is there something I can actually do? I don't think I can hold it. Just bear with me for a moment. Nobody's steal it. Now, this is the moment. We've been through this in years before. This is the moment where you give me your complete, undivided, undiminished, unblemished attention, where every thought you had that you wanted to convey to the person next to you, you put on hold. You hit the pause button on your larynx and you listen carefully, because this is a subject of considerable importance. Now, over the years, I've taken to this stage, to this microphone indeed, to honour premier Australian songsmiths, craftsmen who have helped define us with their creative outpourings, who have told us something about who we are, where we are, how we view each other and the world. Songs, as we know well, are so much more than an assembly of words and melody. The very best ones perform a sort of alchemy upon our minds and souls. They take us somewhere else and somewhere else again. And once they enter our lives, they remain a part of it. They're there for the long haul. It's been my privilege to induct into the Australian Songwriters Hall of Fame such masters as Ross Wilson, Wright Vander and Young, Shorrock Goebel and Birtles, Brewster Neeson and Brewster, Richard Clapton and Brian Cadd. Tonight I present for your acclaim another prolific purveyor of pop perfection who has left us with a brace of masterpieces. I just went looking in my files for the things that I had written about tonight's inductee and his band of long and stellar standing. And there was this, quote, "The church perfected what a Los Angeles Times review described as dense, shimmering, exquisite guitar pop out of an ethereal, haunting sound moulded around Steve Kilbey's mystical images and semi-detached vocal delivery." And you know, that seems to sum it up. I could leave now, but I won't. We first heard from the church in 1981 when they cut through the post-punk mood of Oz rock with the disarming, unguarded moment, and the following year, Almost With You. Draped in paisley shirts and tight black jeans, they conjured some of the poetic pixie persona of the early Mark Bolan, but could still compete as a band of some power in the intense pub scene of the day. Now, our man has been crafting uniquely individual music for a considerable, had been crafting uniquely individual music for a considerable time before that commercial arrival. Stephen John Kilbey was English-born, emerging in Welwyn Garden City on September 13, 1954, and arriving in Australia 3 years later. He started writing songs at the age of 10 and has been bold and brave enough to occasionally trot out some of the pieces he came up with in his early teens. Songs like Don't Rely on Your Friends and Skyscraper Carnivore. The most striking aspect of them is how much they sound like the church. Like so many pivotal figures in Oz rock, Steve found himself transplanted to the lower continent, trying to make sense of himself and music beneath the Southern Cross. Make sense of himself with music beneath the Southern Cross. At 17, he was working in a cabaret outfit and soon after was part of a rock outfit called Precious Little with drummer Peter Coppers. And the Baby Grand, which made a mark around Canberra. He moved to Canberra after living for a time in Wollongong. By 1980, he was in Sydney, where the church would come together, and a month into their life, take on a gifted guitarist from Liverpool, England, Marty Wilson Piper. The two came upon a creative cohesion that drew immediate critical acclaim. Just speaking to him just a moment ago, and I said, well, an association of some tension, of course. I said, but they always are. You know, Pete and Roger, you know, Mick and Keith. I mean, all the great combinations of talent come against each other, brush up against each other, and create wonderful sparks. Now, I would ask you to consider just who was making music in Australia in that year at the time they arrived. It was a phenomenally fertile environment. Just think about it for a moment. Cold Chisel, Angels, The Young in Excess, Split Ends, Australian Crawl, My Sex, Midnight Oil, Rose Tattoo, Flowers Ice House, Jimmy and the Boys, Mental as Anything, Mondo Rock, Radiators, The Rising Men at Work, and so very, very many others of consequence. So for a hopeful new entity to stake out some ground at that time was no small achievement. Certainly, there was a 60s-inspired, neo-psychedelic, sumptuous pop approach with jangly, birdsish riffs, which immediately entranced critics, including myself, who I believe wrote their first record company bios, though I couldn't find them when I went looking. However, to be honest, this was not a musical ensemble of slick proficiency then, but there was those songs, those compelling Kilbey pieces, darker than the physical trappings, which gave off an aura of pending permanence. There was so much meat on the bones of the Of Skins and Heart, Blurred Crusade and Seance albums, and so much majesty to those early striking hits, The Unguarded Moment, Almost With You, Tear It All Away. We weren't quite sure just where this lot had come from. I mean, Canberra and Liverpool not being a recognisable trajectory, but suddenly they were everywhere. One of their early international admirers was Rolling Stone's David Frick up in New York. He would write, and I quote, "At its most compelling, the band scrambles the real and the surreal with ease, rattling its stately guitar..." Now, you've got to get this word right. Guitar architecture, with howling north wind echo and the troubled undertow of Kilbey's enigmatic lyrics. It's like being in the middle of a recurring but constantly evolving dream, where only the faces remain the same. Now, those words of his concern the American breakthrough album Starfish, but in looking at the band's rise, which he had actually watched with interest, Frick credited Steve's knockout way with disdain, as in Tell Those Girls with Rifles for Minds, and the sandy conspiratorial magnetism of his voice. Another band would have milked an album's worth of material from that concentrated grandeur. The Church packed it all in with explosive precision into 4 minutes that seemed to go by in half that. Steve Kilbey was not always an immediately accessible songwriter. Pop fodder was not his line. He crafted dense, complex, personal songs that mattered to him, and if, along the way, they found a large audience, then so be it. But if they did not, then again, so be it. Some years ago, I put together a church anthology CD called Almost Yesterday, and asked a writer friend and Uber church devotee, Dino Scatina, to put some thoughts together for the booklet. He wrote, "The music of the church, when it is right, attacks on a deep emotional level. If you are willing to let it enter your soul, it will guide your spirit through strange worlds and question aspects of your life." Now, he made comparisons to Robert Smith and The Cure, while others have heard what they will and want in the increasingly thickening and beguiling melange of sound. It was American college radio at the time also getting keen about the Hoodoo Gurus, who heard something it particularly liked in the church around the middle of the 80s. The band's fortunes at home had steadied somewhat, with remote luxury in Persia keeping them commercially viable, and heyday returning them to the album top 20. But hit singles seemed to be a part of their past. They toured internationally, had loyal pockets of devotees all over, and continued to make layered music of dignity, grace and charm. And then came Starfish, which for many crystallised all that the church had perfected. It had them high in the American charts, with reviewers claiming it to be bright, spacious and uncluttered, focusing on capturing the band's core sound. In 2008, readers of the Australian newspaper voted Under the Milky Way, the ARIA single of the year at that time, as the best Australian song for the past 20 years. And in response, I found this intriguing, Kilbey said, "It's not really about anything at all. I just wanted to create an atmosphere, and I didn't even put a lot of thought into that. History has given it something that it never really had." Sir, may the nation's citizens beg humbly to differ. It is a moment of magnificence that will never lose its lustre. And let its excellence not diminish the importance of the songs that emerged at the same time and thereafter. The Taut Reptile, Metropolis, Destination, Lost, You're Still Beautiful, Ripple, Chaos, to name but some, along with a brace of sturdy albums, Gold Afternoon Fix, Pre-Sequels Aura, Sometime Anywhere, Magician Among the Spirits, Hologram of Baal, Box of Birds, After Everything Now This, all the way up to Untitled number 23. A prolific, expansive, ambitious, creatively restless band. The church has rewarded its followers richly over 30 years, with Kilbey's cache at the heart of a wholly distinctive, internally impressive sound. Now, so far I've spoken pretty much entirely of the church, but as so many of you out there will know, passionately so, there is another substantial body of work that one must acknowledge, one that bears his name largely alone. I just dug up a piece I wrote in the Financial Review a decade ago concerning this CD, Steve Kilbey, Acoustic and Intimate. I said, the 90s were less kind to them, but punch up Kilbey's name on the net now and you may well think you're on a crash theology course. A number of those devotees gathered in the salty breeze of the Bondi Pavilion High Tide Room in April 2000 to hear the multifaceted creator with a lyrical leaning towards surreal imagery casually work his way through a baker's dozen works from his career span, topped by a compact encore treatise on how I write my songs. It is on this CD that you get to hear those early compositional efforts that I mentioned earlier, and an intriguing listen it is. Steve had put out a solo single in '85, and there was a run of his own albums soon after. Unearthed, Earthed, The Slow Crack, Remindlessness, Narcosis, and after the acoustic volume, Debbie, Freaky Conclusions, Painkiller, Bedroom Demos. Then there's been the Jack Frost project with Grant McLennan of the Go-Betweens. May we remember him well. Collaborations with him, with his Milky Way co-writer Karen Jansen, Donette Thayer, Sandy Chick, Penny Flanagan, Brother Russell, Martin Kennedy, Simon Polinsky, Jeffrey Kane, Ricky Mamie, Stephen Cummings, Kev Carmody, and for all I know, his newsagent and his chiropodist. This is a man who lives and breathes music, who is continually making it, perfecting it, celebrating it. To that extent, he reminds me of another musical sponge of Australian music, of whom I am also constantly in awe, Joe Camilleri. I'm inclined to say that you could put together a uni-degree course on Steve Kilbey, but I suspect somehow it's already in the works. I mean, he is a songwriter, musician, conceptualist, author, painter, well, a true man for all seasons. For so very long, we've all been under his Milky Way, immersed in his musical nutrients. He'll be up here in a moment to receive our accolades, our admiration. But right now, a visual component to some of the things I've been saying. Will you please cast your eyes to the screens?